Well, today marks 50 years since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed in Memphis, Tennessee. The assassination sent shockwaves across the nation.
America is shocked and saddened by the brutal slaying tonight of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
At 7:10 this evening, Martin Luther King was shot in Tennessee. Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died.
That's reaction there to Dr. King's death from President Lyndon B. Johnson, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who was then killed just 2 months later. We also heard from musician and producer Robert Mosley speaking at Carnegie Hall. And here is how people are reacting to Dr. King's death today. There are rallies around the country, including one in Washington, D.C., to honor him and to answer his call to end racism. Bishop Darin Moore is one of the speakers at that rally. He's the chairperson of the governing board of the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the USA. Bishop, 50 years after his assassination, do you feel that we've made the progress that Dr. King had pushed for?
Well, indeed, Dr. King did push this country as a moral voice to reach a place of racial justice. The fact of the matter is that so much of what Dr. King pushed for remains a challenge even now, 50 years later. Dr. King referred to the three evils of racism, militarism, and poverty. And quite frankly, while there were legislative successes during Dr. King's life, recent studies have indicated that with regard to housing, employment, poverty, education, there still remain major areas that need to be addressed. And that's why we rallied today in Washington, D.C.
Bishop Moore, you are a church leader. Tell me a little bit more about the role that you see the church having in keeping Dr. King's legacy alive.
Yes, Rena, what is so important about the church is that we have churches all across this country in every community, suburbs, rural, as well as inner cities. And they become the outposts, if you will, throughout the nation for mobilizing people around the issues of justice and confronting the evils that continue to divide this nation. Unfortunately, to many of our congregations and to many of our mainline churches even, still themselves have to struggle with the issue of racism and white privilege. Please be very clear on the fact that white privilege is the root out of which racism becomes the fruit. Until we confess the issues of white privilege across this country and literally around the world, we'll never then be able to address the acute issues surrounding racism.
It's just remarkable what the church, particularly the African-American church, has been able to do, not just for faith, but also in politics. What message do you have for folks? It was just remarkable, particularly in the South, to see African-American churches, ministers, taking their parishioners to go and vote on Election Day. When you talk about his legacy, about justice, about the future of this country, what do you want to see these congregations do? What direction do you want to take them in?
Absolutely. And this is a call to all congregations. I particularly am a presiding bishop in the AME Zion Church, known as the Freedom Church, because of our role throughout the years in abolition and civil rights. But the mobilization and the voter education of people is central to what it means to have a true democracy in this country. It is tragic that in too many areas across this country, we are pushing back against efforts towards voter intimidation and voter suppression in this country, because the voice of the people ought to be valued no matter their racial, religious, or ethnic background. And so the church plays a key role in education and mobilization. The church cannot be partisan, but we must be engaged in activists to move our people forward.
You know, I look across his legacy, Dr. King's legacy, and you see these images now, black people standing next to white people, pushing for change to take this country in a different direction. As an Asian woman, I know that the changes that took place, that were pushed for in the 60s and the 70s, helped other minorities have certain rights that we really enjoy today. But if there was one thing, Bishop Moore, that you feel we as a society could work out that we haven't quite reached 50 years after Dr. King's assassination, what would that one issue be?
I'd say the issue is value gap. If each of us could acknowledge that there still remains in this society a perceived value gap between white lives and black lives. When we say Black Lives Matter, it is only because black lives continue to be devalued, and the ongoing issues of unarmed black men being killed through police brutality, the lack of educational resources, and on, the issues remain the same, that all lives need to be valued equally. And when that happens, we can then achieve Dr. King's dream of an America where all people can reach their fullest potential.
Bishop Darin Moore, thank you very much for joining us, Bishop.
Thank you for having me.